If you'd like to support this podcast, you can do so by visiting kriskarl.com/podcast, where you'll find links to both Patreon and PayPal, where you can make donations. Any and all support is massively appreciated, and a huge thank you to everyone that has supported thus far. I describe your images as just being incredibly vibrant. There's almost a cinematic feel to them, even when they're shot portrait as opposed to landscape. There's so much about your work that draws me in, and the fact that you cover so many different genres always fascinates me. Before we get to any of that, the first thing we have to do is figure out why it is that you wanted to be a photographer in the first place. So what made you pick up a camera?
Well, I guess I was always a more a visual person. And, when I was a little boy, basically my grandfather introduced me to photography. He was like a hobby photographer, and he had like a bunch of National Geographic magazines that we would like browse through. And I guess that's when I got kind of inspired for sort of like visual art. But it wasn't until I was in my student days that I bought an actual digital camera and was basically totally consumed by it, So I guess because being a visual person, it felt like an extension of me, So that's when I kind of started, and that's, I don't know why it just felt natural, and I just started doing it. And soon after that, basically, I started my first job as a photojournalist and a retoucher, and basically also as a studio assistant, which kind of got me into a position where I could learn a lot of things and eventually, see what I like and what I don't like and what I like to do and what I would like to do in the future. So that was basically kind of the real start in college.
Well, speaking from experience, if you have something that you really enjoy, like a hobby or whatever, and you turn that into a job, that can take a lot of the enjoyment out of it. Was that the case for you when you started to work as a photographer, as opposed to just taking pictures for yourself?
Yes. That's actually what happened. I was like, when I started photographing for money in my student days, it was basically, it wasn't really good pay, to be honest. I couldn't sustain with it myself. And I didn't really necessarily like journalistic photography in Slovenia at that time, just because it was like very stressful. It was very intense. You had to be all over the place, to shoot events and happenings around town. So I kind of distanced myself from that and started working as a graphic designer for my primary job. So that was then my kind of job for sustaining myself, and photography was on the sidelines, but I was able to do whatever I wanted. And that's when I kind of started forming this kind of visual style and, this kind of photography that I liked, Nothing was anxious about it. Nothing was giving me any negative thoughts or whatever. So I basically took that and ran with that, and eventually, because of that, people started reaching out to me for that style. So then it kind of turned from, let's say in a span of 6 years, it turned from sort of this, my escape from everyday life. This kind of escape from everyday, everyday job to basically becoming my primary source of income.
I mean, you mentioned graphic design there, and something that I try to do with everybody whose work I see, essentially, it's something I can't really switch off, is to kind of reverse engineer what it is that they're doing. And with your work, I can definitely see a graphic design element. There's so much to the clean lines and the complementary colors and basically the way that everything feeds into everything else. There's not really, in a lot of cases with your work, there's not really any part of the photo that's not supporting the main subject in its own way, either through color contrast or through its geometry or whatever. that history in graphic design, how much does that help you in terms of your skill set with photography?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, that's actually the case. I think, I think the way I see things is a little bit more, I guess I see a lot of details that I kind of want to include in my compositions. And basically I treat it as sometimes maybe even as a painting, because, but not, you're moving yourself to catch the subjects in a nice composition instead of like making a painting. So I see like a correlation there. But yeah, it's definitely, I guess, being in graphic design and just kind of being that space for so long, definitely, I guess, spilled into my photography. But I wouldn't say it's spilled to the sense that my images are clinical, because sometimes I think if you're a bit too much, if you have like too many details and like everything has to be perfect, I guess sometimes the photograph can be sterile. But I try to avoid that, But yeah, like you said, definitely graphic design has a huge impact on how I compose my photographs, and also in the color palette, I think.
Well, in the course of writing up the questions for this podcast, I think I started the same sentence about 4 times, which was to say that my favorite body of your work, and then basically on an hour by hour basis, what images I preferred would change. And depending on what mood I was in or how long I had spent with them. And I think I pretty much landed on Shapes by the West, but the one that keeps sticking with me is Motel Stories. I absolutely love the sense of Motel Stories. It actually feels almost cinematic, like a Coen Brothers movie, kind of like establishing shots. I just think it's such wonderful work for what could be seen as such a simplified subject. How did you go about coming up with Motel Stories?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically sort of like a reject series, I guess. When I was traveling to add photos to my book, that wasn't called Shaped by the West back then, but like I was just, I was traveling on the Western states and photographing things, and every night I would just randomly stumble up on a motel and just sleep there, because I wanted to keep it sort of organic. I wasn't planning too much. So, when I came to the motels, there was like these atmospheres and these rooms that kind of gave me a little bit of inspiration. Most of the time I would just like, continue shooting after I checked in, So basically it's just like a side product of me traveling. But yeah, I don't think the series is where it should be just yet. I think I'll keep adding to it, maybe eventually do something with it. But I think it's definitely something that I want to expand on, and maybe eventually it can be like something I feel good about, and share it in some sort of medium.
And again, like I say about reverse engineering, trying to break down how something was done. And especially not just in terms of technicalities, but looking at things from the point of view of where the idea came from. Another one of your, I guess, projects, I don't want to mislabel it, but another one of your projects, Bleeding Magenta, I'm just fascinated by where the concept for that came in. And also, to be honest with you, I don't really know if I can even break down the execution of it. So what was the idea behind it, first of all?
Oh, I mostly shoot like analog, medium format, 120 on my Pentax 6.7, but like I like to experiment, I like to experiment with just different techniques, putting stuff in front of lenses, like painting with light, whatever. It just like, it brings me joy to see what I can achieve with these kind of different techniques. So I was basically in white sands, and I was just doing something like that. I was taking photo of landscapes, and it just felt a little bit, it's seen already on, and I just wanted to add sort of like an element to it. So basically I went to this like kind of sand dune, which was in the shade, and I started basically lighting it with the flash on one side. and I added a little bit of color gels, and I guess with the when the light was coming down, it was like a little bit of I would say like it started to be like golden hour, and then I added this magenta gel to it, and it kind of formed this like almost alien like landscape, which kind of seemed very interesting to me. And then I applied that throughout the day, and I basically got a couple of shots that I really liked. And eventually I just started doing that, like I went to Bryce Canyon, for example, and I put a gel on a flashlight, kind of painted the Bryce Canyon, and I would say like it was like long exposure of like 10, 20 minutes. And that kind of became a part of it, and basically I just started adding to that. And then eventually it became a bigger thing. And that's basically the technicalities behind it. But it's, it's kind of sort of like applying something alien to sort of already seen photograph, I guess, and elevating it in that sense.
It seems like something that you do a lot is and again, I'm talking from the outside and I'm entirely likely to be wrong here, but it feels like you like to sort of set yourself restrictions, set yourself projects that sort of put you in a bit of a box, and you have to get creative from within those restrictions. Maybe not in the case of Bleeding Magenta, that's more of a case of trying to find, how to get more from a scene, but it definitely feels like you're the kind of person that doesn't just like to shoot for shooting's sake. You like to set yourself some parameters to work within. I mean, is that the case? Is it something that you really like to do, is to give yourself those restrictions?
Wouldn't necessarily say I think about it in that way. I guess, I'm not like fazed by the thing that a certain thing has been shot a million times. I just kind of try to think how to show it in a different light, if that makes sense. I don't go to, let's say, I don't know, just one sort of a example how basically I shoot. I guess I don't go to the edge of the canyon and shoot the canyon. I like to step back basically and maybe make a composition with some elements of the foreground in it. So I really like multi-layered compositions. So it's kind of, I would say, I don't necessarily think in a way. I don't like to like. I don't even know how I would say this, but like I'm thinking about like what you said, like I'm trying to kind of limit myself and trying to work out of that. But like it kind of makes sense what you said. But in other words, I would just say I kind of try to approach it in a different manner, or try to kind of show something in a little bit of a different kind of, in a different composition, in different light, or in a different setting. Even it can be like a reflection, or what I do a lot is like I do a lot of times I use the roof of my car when I'm traveling as a foreground element. A lot of people think that it's like fog and something is like basically going out of it. So I kind of like to be creative with things I photograph, and that gives me joy basically, So I don't tend to limit myself, but like I do think about how I want to show a certain motive or certain element I'm photographing in a different kind of manner or light or composition.
Well, it feels like with being someone that in your case covers sort of like documentary, cars, portraits, travel, landscapes, and so on, that it's quite easy to get lost and to kind of have your style meander quite a bit, whereas you seem to be really tightly focused, and all of your images look like they were taken by you, despite any changes in genre, changes in light, changes in the effective emotion of the image. It still feels like it's an image taken by you, which is an unbelievably difficult skill that most people never even get close to. From all of the genres that you do cover, is there one that you prefer in terms of the actual process of photographing it, and is there one that you think that you're better than the rest at?
For sure. I mean, I love just, traveling by myself and taking photos. That's always something I love, just because it's kind of gives me, more focus and gives me a little bit more. It doesn't matter what I'm photographing as long as I'm doing it in that manner, if that makes sense. So I kind of like apply this to whenever I have like a project, if I can, of course, not to say that I show everything I photograph, just, I show the things that basically I'm very like, I curate what I show, so I guess, for sustaining myself, I do a lot of stuff that probably people don't see, which maybe not aren't so in my sort of style, right? But you have to pay your rent, so sometimes you have to shoot things that maybe you can't apply that, you know what I mean? But like, yeah, like I said, if I have the possibility, and if people come to me to for that exact style, I like to do it. I like to do it the same way I approach my other photography, like landscapes and the and documentary, right? So let's say, for an example, when I was photographing with Tyler, right? Tyler, the creator, he asked me for this exact style, right? He said, "Oh, I want to be a sharp edge prop in your photographs," and I said, "Oh, can I have a Monday for scouting?" And I did that. I scouted. I set up a location. I set up like a list of location. I presented him with that, and I actually put him basically in the location. But he wasn't like the priority. The location was sort of. I mean,
Mhm.
sure, but he would complement the location and vice versa. But that's kind of the thing I like to do. Like, just kind of, if I have an option of doing that, I like to apply the same kind of workflow that I use for my personal work. Does it make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And you're touching on something at the end there, which I feel like is really a difficult thing for a lot of photographers to understand. I certainly went through a phase of being completely baffled by it, which is for a photographer to be handing over a significant percentage of creative control when they are being, hired for a job. A lot of people seem to think that if they start working as a photographer in any sense, that no matter how big the job is, they'll be the one dictating the way that it's done and so on. And like in your case, the fact that you had that collaborative moment where he tells you what it is that he's looking for leads you to, you didn't stiffen up at that idea and not want to do it. You went and found a way to create something that worked. I'm assuming, obviously, you always want it to work for you, regardless of if it's for a job. And I just think that ability to give up a little bit of creative control is a huge deal for the possibility of a photographer being successful.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Yeah, I mean, look, but also, I guess, I'm fortunate enough to have, a few clients come to me and say, "Oh, we want you for your style," and that's like the hugest compliment I could get, and when I'm presented with that, of course, I'm gonna try to apply, what I've learned from traveling and photographing the American West to it, because I want everything to feel kind of cohesive. And like you said, I want people to know that I photographed that. Like, I mean, I want people to. I want, like, for somebody, when they see a photograph, I want them to say, "Oh, maybe that's Dino," right? And I guess that's something I try to kind of be consistent just in that kind of style,
Mm-hmm. I mean, so we've got a whole bunch of amazing series. You jumped on the Tyler the Create images, which I was actually gonna bring up in a second, but you've got this great collection of almost like mini series or series, and then you've had several go to publication. When it comes to creating work for books, I'm getting the impression from the way that you spoke about Shaped by the West that you create the images and then you start to funnel them into a project rather than go out with a direct brief for yourself when you're creating a book.
Yeah, I mean, for that specific series, it was basically, I had a huge body of work that I did from 2006. I would say just even as early as 2015 to 2019, right? So everything felt very. I wanted to put that in a series. It was like meant to be in a series, but I kind of had to sit on it, marinate it a little bit, to kind of be comfortable enough and start putting that into a final product. And then I eventually got a offer for the book, and that's when that started. Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, that's how that specific series was formed. But like going forward, I want to be more structured in terms of projects, and I want to do for a few of the next projects I'm doing, I want to be a little bit more like focused on maybe a specific thing, because the whole series Shaped by the West was very kind of personal, very about me. So I let it form very organically. But going forward, I'd want to like focus more on specific subjects that aren't so personal. Basically, I want to be more limited in terms of what I'm photographing, or more just let's just use the word focused, because limited, I don't like to limit myself.
Well, earlier this month, you actually made an announcement about an upcoming release of a publication that you've got. Do you want to, I'll let you just take the floor and kind of tell us about this upcoming book.
Yeah, basically it's like a mini publication with Setanta Publishing and Open Doors Gallery. And it's basically a publication in their bi-monthly series of like these publications that showcase an up-and-coming artist. And this is the fifth one in the series. And it basically features, sort of a similar work that you would know, what you would expect from me, but like it focuses not so on the West. It also features work from Louisiana, and two photos of a project I did with social media star Jay Versace. So it's basically I'm filling the gap in this like 2 years that I didn't, actually this two years after Shaped by the West. And I think it's like a nice jumping stone for the next thing I want to do, which is probably going to differ from what you're used from, what people, I guess, expect from me. But I really like they reached out to me, because it's, my friend Arno Montagard, he did a book with them, and I really liked what they did. So it was basically pretty cool that they say they want to do something with me too. And I just got basically a couple of copies actually yesterday, I think, and I'm really happy with the product. So, I mean, it's a nice slow photo book to keep on your coffee table,
Well, it's been a really tough month for people that work in any kind of creative business, and even just for people who do it in their spare time to go out with their camera and try and create something. So I'm imagining, given how crappy the last year has been, it must be really nice to be in the position where you have something coming out at the end of that, hopefully towards the end of that series of events, that kind of, it feels like you're producing something still, you're still working, you're still creating, where a lot of people are, struggling with that. That's obviously got to be a wonderful feeling.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, not to say that 2020 was, all that good for me, because we all felt this year. Let's be honest. It wasn't a year to remember fondly. But I mean, I'm happy that this happened, and I'm happy that I had the opportunity to basically work with them, and hopefully 2021 is better. I mean, I have plans on like I told you, creating new series, but I don't feel like really comfortable talking about it just yet. But yeah, I mean, what can be worse than 2020, right?
Yeah, well, I'm kind of at this point, I'm scared to imagine. If I can jump back to something I actually saw on your website, and it's a quote of yours that I find very interesting, and I kind of want to unpack it a little bit. And the quote is that
sure.
Solitude is a driving factor with your work. And in terms of solitude as a driving factor, is that as much about shooting style as it is about the way that you compose your images and your preference for composition?
No, I mean, I just really like, when I'm creating, basically when I'm going on a road trip and like creating more work, I just like the feeling. And I think I'm more focused. I have no distractions, and I can just go to a location and stay there for 6 hours, or maybe like a whole day, or maybe come back, or maybe just I'm not restricted by anything, or anybody. So that's something that it's like a very liberating feeling. So it's like, I feel like that's a big part of me, and how I create my personal work. So that's why I say like solitude is a driving factor, because it kind of is, right? It just makes me feel good. It makes me like it's sort of like a therapeutic feeling for me. So it's basically my psychiatrist, so to speak.
Right.
And yeah, it's just kind of, I feel good, when I do that. It's like basic as that. And I think I'm going to keep doing it in that sort of way. Maybe like I told you earlier, maybe in a more structured, a little bit more focused way. But yeah, I mean, I love to go out there just alone and, drive and explore the American West, or like the American, we'll see where I go next. But like, that's just like something I really love to do. Really. I mean, it just gives me so much joy.
So to go from publishing work in books where people can have it at home, like you said, on their coffee table, which I think more people should do. I think that's something that every photographer should be doing, is buying books as opposed to just looking at stuff on Instagram or on their phone. That's absolutely one of the biggest steps photographers can take to improve not only their work, but just their enjoyment of other people's work. Another thing that you've done is exhibiting your work. And obviously, I think there's a bit of a 2020 theme to what happened with you exhibiting it. So what happened with your first solo gallery opening?
Oh, yeah, that's sort of a bittersweet.
Right.
So Photon Gallery reached out to me, or it was basically late 2019, I think, before, the pandemic hit, and they were like, we want to have that's in Slovenia, right, where I'm from. So they were like, we want to have your solo exhibition about, your work shared by the West. And I was like, yeah, I was like amazed. It's like having the first solo exhibition. It's like just really, I guess it's a really good achievement, and it's a great feeling to have as a photographer, that somebody wants to dedicate their space to show only your work. That's amazing and very humbling to me. And yeah, then 2020 hit, and I was like, oh man, this is probably not gonna happen. I was a little bit bummed about it, but what can you do, right? But then we started talking at the end of the year, and they said, no, let's just go ahead with it. We'll do what we can. We'll be open and social distance if we can. And yeah, we actually went and we worked on like preparing the photographs. We worked on how to put the images up, like what we're gonna do in different rooms, and it opened in late December, and unfortunately I wasn't able to be there, but still I'm pretty happy, that it actually, the 2020 actually ended on a good note. Like that's amazing for me, because it's sort of it sort of like made the year a little bit better for me.
I mean, you mentioned it there. It's probably only the very astute detectives that listen to this that have figured out that you don't have a native New York or California accent, that you are most certainly Slovenian. Obviously, now we're both Europeans, and you've spent a lot of time. You're in America, I'm assuming permanently, and I've spent a fair bit of time visiting America. One thing that's a big deal at the moment with photography in America, especially with film, and this doesn't make sense, I'm more than happy to reword it, but is what I would call like a fetishizing of retro subjects. So this kind of glamorizing the old school design, the old motels like you've got, the old cars and so on. And I'm just curious from a European's perspective, because obviously I think design over in Slovenia is going to be vastly different historically, and in England is vastly, vastly different historically from what they were doing in America in the 40s, 50s, 60s and 70s.
For sure.
Do you feel like modern design is just very, very uninspiring, and that's what's pushing a lot of people to go and seek out more retro design work to photograph?
That's a good question. I mean, So to go back to Slovenia, I mean, I guess growing up in an environment like that, just having buildings, 500, 600 years old buildings around me all the time growing up, I guess it was sort of something I took for granted, I guess. And I wasn't so inspired by it or like photographing it. And then coming to the US and seeing like all this, like very vastly different, like architecture or like, cars or, people, everything, like these vast landscapes. I guess I was just attracted to the different, not necessarily like vintagey, but like different, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. But yeah, a lot of those subjects are basically on road trips, are basically, what you encounter. You encounter like old school cars, you encounter motels, because we have motels in Europe, but they're just not so flashy, because like in America, in the 60s, 70s, when like the whole motor industry was lobbying so much and everything was basically on the road, they need to be flashy for you to stop, and that, I guess, those kind of differences and those just kind of attracted me more, and basically growing up in Slovenia when we kind of went from a socialist government to the Democratic Republic, and all the capitalism came in, this was the symbols I was presented with, when growing up, this was like something that, was communicated to us as the promised land, or this is like, the best place to be in the world. So growing up with that, I was very compelled by these images. I was very compelled to these subjects, this kind of notion of road trip and all these American cars and neon signs and whatnot. And I guess that stuck with me, and I was like attracted to all these subjects. But like to get back to your question, if I think like new design is like not so interesting. I mean, I don't know. I guess people really kind of like some vintage aspect of things, longing for things gone. So I guess it's like just something. I think it's a feeling that people like, or like a visual aesthetic. But yeah, I've seen that it's been like very fetish, like you said. I'm sorry, I maybe not be able to pronounce this word.
It's okay, I barely could.
You know what I'm thinking about? Yeah, I think it's like, yeah, it's been, especially I've seen like in the last few years with the resurgence of film, like a lot of young people have started like doing and capturing subjects like Stephen Shore has, back in the 70s and 60s. And yeah, that kind of correlates with my work. So that's why I'm like thinking about, when I was talking about having ideas from new series, it's maybe I kind of want to sort of distance myself eventually, in the series that I'm working on from this aesthetic a little bit, but like still stay true to myself, just because it's like it's getting a little bit oversaturated at this point, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you've mentioned film there, and I feel like, I mean, you mentioned the last couple of years being a big deal. I feel like we're kind of reaching a little bit of a pivotal point with film photography in its resurgence, where, cameras, the prices are skyrocketing. Every time someone goes on YouTube and does a video about a new camera they've bought, all of the prices on eBay go through the roof. This past couple of weeks, we've seen what's happened with Fuji 400H, where everyone had to post about how they were going to miss it, even though they'd never shot it. And now the price for that has shot up through the roof. And it feels like we're at a bit of a critical point here. Kodak prices are going up. Fuji are discontinuing stuff. Cameras are going to limit at some point because they're not being made in anywhere near the scale that they used to be. And people aren't generally buying the new ones. I'm just wondering kind of what you feel like the future of film photography is.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting era, definitely, definitely very interesting. It's kind of, I remember like it was like 7-8 years ago when my friend got a Contax T2 from Berlin for 200 euros. And I was like, whoa, that's nice, I was like, oh man, that's good. Now harder, like they're like $1,000 or even more, right? I guess like, I don't know, like when something's popular, and especially in the social media era, this tends to happen with things. Yeah. I mean, I don't know where it's gonna go, but I don't know. I mean, like for me personally, I shoot like both. I shoot for digital and analog, and the process of analog photography is like a little bit more fulfilling to me. But it's hard to say where it's gonna go. I just hope some of the companies start producing some new film cameras, or just put some resources into that. But I guess it's like still on a global scale, it's such a small market that I guess it's not worth it. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but if we come back to maybe the subjects, I just feel like it's also been a little bit oversaturated, right? So I think maybe, like with the cameras, like, what was that girl? Oh, Kendall Jenner, right? She had that Context T2
right.
on the one of the late shows, and like with that, I guess, like when more photographers that a lot of people, a lot of young photographers follow, work in that kind of sort of aesthetic, I guess they will follow, and they will like try to do similar images just to basically, I guess, learn or just imitate, and I guess that's what tends to go towards this oversaturation of this vintagey sort of feeling. But then it's hard to talk about this because I have a certain view of it, and it's like a very subjective view. I still think, I'll if I see a nice car along the road or a sign and I feel compelled to shoot it, I'm going to shoot it no matter what, somebody else has shot, because I'm going to shoot it in, my way, I guess, So I just don't think we should limit ourselves by, saying, oh, everybody has shot that, try to do it in maybe a different way, or try to, apply something yours to it. Or maybe, maybe you find, maybe you achieve, or maybe you find a different way of showing it, or maybe a different, I don't know. It's hard to tell me, but like, I would say just not limit yourself to fads or what other people are saying is not okay to shoot or okay to shoot. You photograph whatever your heart's desire, I guess.
You mentioned there that you shoot both digital and analog, and a bit of a two-part question would be, when is something a digital shoot and when is something an analog shoot? And the other side of it would be, do you photograph differently? Obviously the process is different, like you said, but do you feel like your photographs are different if you shoot on analog compared to digital in terms of what you're doing?
I feel like, I kind of, to a certain extent, right, I kind of translated the style into my digital photography. But to be completely honest, like with the amount of sharpness and clinical images that like new lenses produce, I don't think it's ever going to be like an analog image. Whatever you try to do to it, it's still a bit too clean and too perfect, so to speak. But I would say, like, in terms of like how I shoot, it's on par, with analog photography. But I kind of like doing both. For experimentation, it's easier to do it on digital, because I can see right away what I'm doing, and then maybe, I know what composition I'm gonna have. I know what kind of light I'm gonna have, and then I do 2-3 analog photos. And most of the time, the analog ones are the ones I'm gonna use. And I like to do that even like in commercial stuff I work. I would like, if I photograph a person, I'd be like, okay, let's do maybe first set with the digital camera, and then I review it. I say, like this image is really nice. And then I say, okay, let's take let's do one set with one film roll, and then I do the compositions or the photographs that I like the most on the digital. I kind of say, okay, let's do these 3 and with analog. And like I said before, most of the time the analog basically wins out, right? But I kind of help myself with digital to achieve better analog photographs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. You mentioned near the beginning that you've obviously done graphic design and some retouching. I'm just kind of curious to know your thoughts when it comes to retouching film scans.
I mean, I don't, you know, as a visual artist, you can do whatever, you know, you can basically retouch your whole image if you want to, you know. Sorry, I meant like digital artist. You can do whatever you want. But then again, you know, I don't know. It's like I don't even. it's a hard question to answer. Actually, I don't feel like you should limit yourself in any way, you know. But then again, yeah, I guess I don't know. I would have to think about it, you know, because maybe sometimes I'm a little bit, oh man, you know, if you're gonna do, I have this like kind of, I would say, view on things that never try to limit yourself. But like then again, you know, it is, you know, you're getting a huge amount of real estate like on 20 film. Why would you know, you can crop it, but like why would you do all this retouching to it? You know, you can, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like you touched on there, the cropping side of things is what actually always confuses me.
Yeah.
I'm fine with people, like you said, people can do whatever they want to do. From my own point of view, my perspective doesn't really matter because that's not really the point that anyone's listening to this. Yeah. But from my point of view, I guess more I'm curious as to the motivation of photographing something on a medium that you're then going to try and fix the medium, which is kind of strange to me.
Exactly.
But when it comes to the cropping is where I have the most issue, is that it seems really strange to me to photograph on film and give yourself all of that latitude and all of that, like you said, all that real estate, and then crop in. You could have just photographed it by cropping in. And if you couldn't photograph it by cropping in, like if you couldn't get close enough for whatever reason, you could have found another way to photograph it. When cropping comes into film photography is when I actually get really confused. Not in a bad way. Not like I don't like the person for doing it, but I just get confused by it.
Yeah. Same. You know, when you answered this question, I was like basically fighting in my mind. You know what I mean? So it's like, I totally agree with you. You know, I mean, yeah, you can do whatever you want, but then, you know, yeah, I struggle with certain things. Just take it on digital photo, crop in like with a 50 megapixel, 100 megapixel sensor. You could crop into like 100% and still get a usable image, you know? But, you know, it's like people are free to do whatever they want, right? So who are we to judge, basically? I guess.
Well, I run a podcast. I can judge everyone.
That's true. That's true. No, but like, look, I guess, like you said, you know, it's like, yeah, certain things that people do that don't seem logical, but they're still gonna do them, right? So I like if I come back, you know, I don't see a problem if you retouch your photo and make it like look like you want to look at it. But yeah, I do have a little bit of a hard, like you, I would say I have a hard time understanding why you would like crop or like a 120 photo, because you're basically taking a photo that's, you know, first of all, a lot more expensive, you know, to first of all get, you know, you have to buy film, you have to scan, you have to develop film. Then, you know, the cameras are reaching a crazy amount of prices. So in all, you can get, I guess, come to the same photo a lot easier.
Yeah, it's a strange situation. One of my favorite things about being a European is that we are really good at broadly generalizing each other. So if you get an Englishman to talk to a Frenchman, I think that we'd have very general things to say about each other. And we tend to take it in good humor overall. I think everyone knows that, you know, Germans are painfully efficient, but have absolutely no sense of humor. People in England all just go to Spain twice a year, wreck it and walk around in their pants, and they're all alcoholics. You know, we have these broad generalizations, which I absolutely love. I've worked with a couple of Slovenians, and they are the couple that I have worked with have been very confident. It was back in my days of actually working as a baker, and they were very confident and very, very, very assured of themselves, and they wouldn't accept any questioning. And I don't get that same feel from you. But as we start to wrap this up, a question I do want to ask you is, as someone that's got so much fantastic work, and you've worked with some big publications. You've got some fantastic work behind you. Do you ever find yourself feeling insecure, or do you ever have off days where you just don't feel like your work is good enough? Because for a lot of photographers, they go through that all the time. And, in like someone like my case, I've probably got a point. I don't have a tremendous amount of even remotely good work. So that insecurity kind of makes sense. When it's someone like yourself, I think a lot of us want to feel like you are human, and that there are times you feel like it's just not working. You're not happy with your work, and you have those off days when it comes to your confidence. So is that the case?
Yes, I mean, that's like all the time. I mean, it's like I've been sitting on a lot of photos for so long that like when I go through Shape by the West, like when I go through my book, I don't like anything. It's just because I've seen this photo so many times. And like, yeah, like when you create, that's like a part of it, I guess, and to a certain extent, I guess you have to be, the most critical to your work, right? To yourself. But yeah, I mean, I guess I sometimes really struggle with that. Is something even worth showing, or something even worth like printing, or is this going to be, insecurities of like that are, constant. I'm not like some egomaniac that's like, oh yeah, this is the best work in the world. And, everybody's going to see it and be like, wow, no way. Not even close. Not even close. So it's like, a lot of times it's like battling with myself. And, I'm happy that I have friends like, my really good friend, like photographer Arno Montagard, that we can kind of discuss these things, and like I really, really, really appreciate having like photographer friends. And even Willem Verbeek, like I met him like a few like I would say like last year actually. And we kind of discuss these things. It's amazing to have people that can give you a little bit different perspective, to kind of step away from your view and your thinking, your mind, and you kind of land on a different I guess you kind of have a different how would I say, you have a different view at the end, by talking to people. And that's always, I think, a good thing to have, just kind of a different perspective, because most of the times our subjective look isn't really, isn't really the realistic look, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think photographers and anyone that works in a creative sense suffer tremendously from having an emotional attachment to the moment that something was created, as opposed to looking at it as a standalone piece. We know what was on the outside of the frames. We know what was on the outside of the border. So it's very hard for us to detach from the moment it was taken.
Yeah, so when you say that, like right there, it comes to mind, some of the photos I absolutely like are my favorites that I took. They're like, people probably don't like, but like some of the most popular are really like bad to me personally, just because like when you, I guess as a photographer, when you see a certain photo, you remember the way you felt when you took it. So it's different to you than to somebody else, right? So you associate certain feelings with it that are only known to you, not to the viewer, right? So
yep, 100%.
I guess that makes it sometimes even makes it really hard for me to kind of put a series together, just because like it's, like just because of that, I have certain attachments. I remember when I was alone there, like the light was amazing. I felt really nice. And that comes back and I guess elevates that photo in my mind, even though it might be crap, right? But like in my mind, like that sort of feeling in that time, or that, when I remember that, it makes me feel good and elevate this certain piece. But yeah, like I said, like it's always amazing to have like certain people to kind of discuss these things with. And, I'm fortunate enough to have those people, and I'm very grateful to have them.
Well, I'm really grateful to have had you on the show. I really do appreciate you taking the time. This is actually the most important moment. So this is where we tell everyone where they can go to find all of your amazing work and so on. So please feel free to plug away your Instagram, website, and so on.
So my website is dinokuznik.com, and my Instagram is @dinokuznik. So that's at DINOKUZNIK. That's basically, where I kind of post my new work and where I announce any new publications I have or any new shows that are going on. So, feel free to follow and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or, about photography or in general. I always like to respond, So don't be shy if you want to learn anything about even how I published my book or something. So I'd be happy to help anybody.
Well, everyone listening to this also needs to go and buy not only a copy of your new book, but also pick up your back catalogue as well. So, we've got to start encouraging photographers to buy books. It's really important.
For sure.
A massive thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really do appreciate it. It's meant a lot.
Thank you, Kris. It was amazing. I really enjoyed your questions, and hopefully maybe we do this sometime again. I really loved it. So thank you.